So I'm currently making this video in less than optimal working conditions, so apologies if the editing is a little rough on this one. So I was browsing Twitter yesterday, and before I get 20 comments immediately telling me that was a mistake, and I get pinged by someone notifying me that someone I was following did something racist, which stun-locked me at first because I thought I had blocked Elon Musk. Then I came across someone getting completely incinerated by the entirety of the cartoon community for their take on the new Fairly OddParents show, A New Wish. I looked into it a little more, and I was surprised to see that I recognized the guy who made it, Ask Air. I talked to the guy a handful of times in the past since a few of my friends were friends with him, and he has a semi-decent following, though I never really knew the guy or could say I was really friends with him. I think the last time I talked to him was like 2 years ago, and I was just sending him stupid British memes on Discord, so at first I wondered what could he have possibly done to make everyone this mad. And then I watched the video and contemplated swan diving out my window. This video is about how modern cartoon reboots are awful, which is almost like 10 years late to the party, I guess, but he does say something unique with this video by being comically wrong about almost everything he says, making points that are borderline racist, and then throwing a hissy fit towards anyone calling him out for making such a shit video. Okay, in retrospect, maybe it's a good thing that I kept my distance from this guy. What also struck me as odd, haha, is that this video seemed to focus a lot on Fairly OddParents, A New Wish, and trying to group it in with Disney live-action reboots and Teen Titans Go for some reason. And the main argument, instead of actually showing why he thinks the show is bad, was that he thought Hazel was a race-swapped version of Timmy Turner, and the moment I heard this, I leapt off my bed, turned off my laptop, and proceeded to write this entire video. This is one of the most confidently wrong videos I have watched in a good while, and probably the most efficient way I've seen someone prolific in this community set fire to their reputation. And I had to watch Mr. Enter bring up September 11 when talking about turning red, though you can argue there wasn't much of a reputation to burn there. I'm going through this point by point starting now.
I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone as one does, and I came across this monstrosity, the Fairly OddParents reboot, and it was just as bad as I expected it to be.
One thing you're immediately going to notice is that not once does he ever actually elaborate on why he thought A New Wish was bad, nor does he ever provide examples. The most he says is
mindless drivel plot lines, flashy art style, and an overt unfaithfulness to the source material,
which are incredibly surface level critiques that he does not use any examples to back up. Not to mention that the last point especially is just flat out wrong. A New Wish is probably the single most faithful reboot I have ever seen because it isn't a f***ing reboot, it's a sequel series. I called it a reboot in my title, but at least in the video I admitted that it was just because everyone was calling it that. The series brings back many of the characters from the original Fairly OddParents, outright fixes many of the show's issues that gave it a bad rep in its later seasons, and the second half of the show specifically genuinely feels like a love letter to the original series made by people who cared about what they were making. Even if you don't like it, you cannot in good faith argue that the show is unfaithful or disrespectful to the source material. It just straight up isn't. And not to act like you can't have an unpopular opinion on something, but when you're digging into a show that is literally the current darling of the cartoon community, I think you should probably try bringing your A game. There's a lot of really bad videos about shows or movies that are universally despised, such as Velma, but they're able to get away with it being poorly argued because Velma is in fact a bad show for poor reputation. You can't do the same thing for A New Wish because there's no negativity bias in play. People will see through the bullshit.
This is a repeated cancer that is spreading to more and more properties, and is only destructive in nature. And so I gotta take the mantle and expose just what makes these properties so inherently bad.
This isn't a critique of the video itself, but I love whenever a creator says something like this completely unironically in a video that everyone ends up hating.
I'm old enough to remember back in Yale 2016 when everyone was trashing the new reboot at the time, Teen Titans Go.
I'm giving you 17 sin points for trashing on Teen Titans Go in 2024. The show is 11 years old at this point and bitching about it went out of style 6 years ago. This is also not helped by the fact that every time he brings Teen Titans Go up in this video, he's just parroting what everyone's been saying about it for over a decade and adds nothing new.
And it was the Powerpuff Girls, Ben 10 reboot, Rise of TMNT.
Wait, why is Rise of the TMNT here? I'm not a fan of the show myself, but that show was a pretty big fandom last I checked, and most of the complaints people had about it were at the start of the show's run. Even then, I think comparing it to Teen Titans Go, Powerpuff Girls 2016, and Ben 10 2016 is f***ing wild, but okay.
These Disney reboots do more than just rip off the original for monetary gain. No, no, no. They actively disrespect the source material while they do it. They have to warp the brand to their liking.
I think you can tell what tone the video is gonna take from here on. Look, I'm gonna be so honest here, dude. I think there's far bigger problems with the Little Mermaid live-action movie than Ariel being played by a black actress.
This Teen Titans Go syndrome has only gotten worse nowadays, because instead of just telling unfunny stories, modern reboots, especially in the animated realm, aim to purposely disrespect the original vision.
Showing footage from A New Wish here is absolutely hilarious because basically everyone agrees that Butch Hartman fell off around the mid to late 2010s and actively ruined the Fairly OddParents. Like, that show is getting worse and worse per season, and one of the main reasons why A New Wish has been so successful is because he had very little involvement. Modern day Butch Hartman can't write a solid season of television for and A New Wish is a massive breath of fresh air in comparison because even if you don't like it, it feels like people were actually trying to write a show instead of constantly phoning it in.
Starting off off with the fact that the original creators don't want this kind of stuff, almost ever. We've all heard of how Steven Hillenburg never really wanted a reboot of SpongeBob, but ever since his late passing, Nick has capitalized on 2 already.
I swear to God, if I hear one more person lie about Steven Hillenburg and hold his death over all SpongeBob content released after the fact, I'm actually gonna bust an aneurysm. The idea that Steven Hillenburg hated the idea of SpongeBob spin-offs is a myth that was spread around based on one interview he had back in 2009, where he said he didn't see any SpongeBob spin-offs happening anytime soon, and also basing their anger off of a tweet from a man that hasn't worked on SpongeBob in years. There was nothing about him saying he'd never make one or that he hated the idea. This was also the same interview where he stated he didn't have any interest in making a sequel. Yet lo and behold, he returned to help write the story for the second SpongeBob movie and was an executive producer on Sponge on the Run before he passed away. There's also the fact that Vincent Waller, a longtime writer, director, and producer on SpongeBob, stated that Steven knew about the Camp Coral spin-off that was in production and likely had no problem with it, and went as far as to argue against many people who were saying he would never make a spin-off. I absolutely cannot stand it when people continue to spread this lie that the SpongeBob spin-offs were made right after Steven's death, when he knew and had an active hand in all SpongeBob productions until his death. It is a nasty and disrespectful way to twist the over a decade-old words of a dead man to fit your agenda, and all it ever does is cause the people working on these new SpongeBob projects to be harassed and constantly be told that they're somehow disrespecting Hillenburg's legacy and acting like they personally knew the man.
Let's give it bright, saturated animation to the point where kids get a corneal ulcer. Why not? Kids like colors, right?
I'm sorry, but the way this is phrased suggests that there's an inherent problem with giving a cartoon bright and colorful animation. That might just be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life.
I feel like everything I'm saying only relates to reboots post-2010.
Funny you should say that, given you proceed to not mention nearly any reboots from the 2010s that have been positively received for the entirety of this video and exclusively single out the bad ones. Just off the top of my head, we got DuckTales, Thundercats, Voltron, I can't believe I'm about to say this, My Little Pony, Danger Mouse, The Looney Tunes Show, and last time I checked, She-Ra was mostly well received, until the end of it anyway.
Because prior to that, most reiterations weren't like this. Most were better than the originals, and actually kept gritty tones with cool brooding art style.
Once again, I don't think you understand what a reboot is. Batman Beyond and Ben 10 Alien Force / Ultimate Alien are all sequels.
Most were better than the originals, and actually kept gritty tones with cool brooding art styles. Now it's just a rainbow contest to see which show is brighter than the rest. Maybe that'll keep the kiddies in their seats a little longer.
While I absolutely understand the problem of some reboots having drastically different art styles and tones compared to the originals, and I think it's a somewhat valid critique, it's completely shot down by your editing choices, because why the f would the Powerpuff Girls not be colorful? Sure, 2016 is considerably brighter than the original, but are you seriously gonna tell me this is the right example of what you're talking about?
Let's make all the characters flanderized and dumb while we're at it. Kids connect to dumb people more, right? It also gives us a cheap way of actually creating humor. Stupid people are funny.
Don't worry, I am absolutely gonna get mileage out of this clip, just you wait. Also, nearly everything said in this video about reboots being more childish and simple than the originals has been parroted to death for over 10 years now. This is not original commentary in the slightest, you're just beating a dead horse.
These modern reboots just go back to square one while ignoring all the story arcs that preceded them. Stupid people are funny.
The entire point of a reboot is going back to square one, you dickhead.
Don't forget the forced memes and trends, disgusting imagery, and weird detailed faces.
Okay, the forced memes I do get, but not once do you provide an example of horrific imagery or disgusting faces, and I'm starting to think that you either experienced the Mandela effect or forgot that the main show that got a lot of complaints for that around the same time reboots were getting dunked on online was SpongeBob.
Look, I've made a whole different video explaining how being more mature or focused on story doesn't necessarily make a show better. That video gives a lot more nuance than I'm frankly giving here, but listen.
I agree with this point. Mature cartoons are not always better, and people who have a problem with that are usually just insecure about the fact that they watch shows mainly aimed at children. Now let's see where this goes.
You can't just say you're delivering something new for the current generation while abandoning the people who made your franchise what it is by watching all those years ago. Don't ruin our childhoods for your own creative laziness.
I never understand people who say that a reboot or a different interpretation of a property they loved as kids is somehow ruining their childhood. How is it ruining your childhood exactly? If you had good memories of watching something during your childhood and you can still look back fondly on it, the original show also isn't going anywhere. You can still watch it anytime you want. Being an adult and saying something ruins your childhood because you don't like it is a very embarrassing take to have. You can't just analyze and say why it's not as good as the original. No, it has to have also ruined your childhood too. Call me back when it also burns your crops and poisons the water supply. Other than that, I do understand the complaint of reboots completely abandoning the original show's identity, but it's also the exact same thing I've been hearing about reboots since Teen Titans Go premiered, so I don't actually care.
I mean, no one wants to talk about it, but the current bandwagon is the whole race swapping thing that they'll have to do with animated characters. April O'Neil, Timmy Turner, Velma, etc. Stupid people are funny.
Okay, I'm not gonna say anything about the fact he's using the red head replacement image unironically, but what in the flying f***ing deuce do you mean Hazel's a race-swapped version of Timmy Turner? Do you even know what race-swapping is? Hazel is a completely different character in a sequel series. Timmy still exists in A New Wish. He just has hasn't been shown yet. He's been brought up plenty of times, sometimes by name. Hazel has a completely different personality and design. How can you argue in good faith that Hazel's a race swap Timmy Turner? I don't get it.
Remember when Hank Azaria was shamelessly ousted from playing Apu in The Simpsons because he wasn't the race of the character? Because I do.
This has nothing to do with your previous point or reboots in general. This is a completely unrelated issue. Okay, so this video is about to completely nosedive, so please bear with me. So far it's been pretty bad, but this is genuinely the point of no return.
When everything is racial, that's the only thing I can see when watching. I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg, or Gerald, or Static Shock. A lot of my favorite characters are people of various ethnicities and racial tones.
Jesus tap dancing Christ, where to begin with this one. The whole I don't see race angle to this video completely falls apart the longer it goes on, as it just gets blatantly more racist, but let's tackle this right now.
I never saw Blade as a black character.
You never saw Blade as a black character. Blade. F***ing seriously.
I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg.
So he's calling you a terrible name.
You know what it feels like to be judged simply because of how you look?
Of course I do. I'm part robot.
Look, as funny as that last part is, you can absolutely see what the writer's intent was with this scene.
I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg, or Gerald.
Hey Arnold is a show that actively celebrates diversity. I don't think this is the best example for you to use, Chief.
I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg, or Gerald, or Static Shock.
Oh, now I know you're just making up bullshit. You don't see Static Shock as black. First of all, Virgil's name is not Static Shock, that's the name of the show. His hero name is just Static. If you actually watched the show, you'd know that. Secondly, a lot of the story in Static Shock is literally centered around Virgil being black. The 8th episode of the show, Sons of the Fathers, is about how Richie's dad is a racist bigot and Virgil overhears him saying racist shit about him.
Now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are.
This is only the 8th episode of the show. How can you sit here and genuinely say you never saw Static as a black character? If you actually watched the show instead of just being a poser and using it as an argument, you would know this. The whole not seeing or acknowledging a black character as being black isn't some profound or informed position for you to have. It makes you ignorant, especially when said character's racial identity is a main focus. Like for f***'s sake, Milestone Comics, the guys who literally created Static, were formed in 1993 by a coalition of African American artists and writers specifically to address the lack of minority representation in comics. I am literally paraphrasing from Wikipedia here because that's the bare minimum research you should have done for this.
A lot of my favorite characters are people of various ethnicities and racial tones.
Fucking hell. Okay, ignoring how you somehow thought it was a good idea to use Uncle Ruckus as an example of a black character you like after saying all of that bullshit from before, this is literally the I can't be racist, I have black friends argument but for cartoon characters. Put me in a bloody casket, this cannot be real.
The black female Timmy Turner is clearly just a cheap attempt to reboot this property without any other significant pitches for change.
Hazel is not a race swap of Timmy Turner. If you actually watched the show, you would know this. She is a completely different character. And given that when confronted on this take on Twitter, you backpedaled and then revealed that you're only making the argument because she's a black protagonist who happens to be the successor to a white protagonist, how do you expect people to see this as anything but racism?
I mean, for the diversity folks, there must be a point where this hurts the cause more than it helps it.
I don't know what this added to your video exactly, but, okay.
Maybe Butch Hartman wants Timmy to be race and gender swapped, which is why he has absolutely no direct involvement in the creative department of the project. I find that unlikely. It's absolutely insulting to ruin a person's original vision of a character just because people want to see themselves on screen.
Okay, ignoring how you're still on the Hazel is just a black Timmy Turner nonsense, there's no way you're unironically saying Butch's involvement would have made A New Wish better or more in line with his original vision. No one even knows what Butch's current vision for Fairly OddParents is because he demonstrated for over a decade that he has no sodding clue either. If Butch was involved in the show beyond just being an executive producer, I genuinely think it would have gone down in flames.
These people are too uncreative to create their own original stories, so they need to ruin existing stuff to be able to call themselves inclusive and hip with the times.
Notice how this video slowly drifted away from being about the quality and issues of cartoon reboots and just became a Canadian madman ranting and raving about black people in cartoons for some reason.
This absolutely also hinders the story and episode quality, as the main selling point here is the obvious element that's right in front of us, but no one's allowed to acknowledge it for some reason.
He's straight up saying that Hazel being black is somehow meant to be a selling point, with the context being that he thinks she's a race swap of Timmy Turner. Good god, that's bad. And that's without mentioning that he's legitimately deluded himself into thinking that the reason no one talks about Hazel being a selling point due to her race is because he thinks no one wants to acknowledge it. Like, that's just delusion. That's just a delusion. That's just a cope. No one buys into your shitty belief about Hazel being a selling point due to her race. Not because they don't want to acknowledge it out of fear of being called racist for some reason, but because they are normal people and that sort of warped thought doesn't even begin to cross their minds. I think the main selling point isn't whatever racist delusion you've bought into, mate. It's the fact that the series is a direct sequel to one of the most popular and iconic Nickelodeon cartoons of all time. Also, I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to the episode quality being affected by Hazel being black. Like, no, that's not how it works. Also, you're wrong about this show. It slaps. Cry about it.
I just despise seeing a person's work be disrespected.
No, shut the fuck up. Stop showing Steven Hillenburg and spreading misinformation. Stop speaking for dead people. It's gross.
Claim that the actor's audition and skill level determine who gets the role. And that would be fair, but it's totally different with an animated character made of pixels. Although even that's under question these days when the new Snow White or Ariel can't even sing, but are preferred over tons of other actors.
Okay, of all the things I've seen people complain about when it comes to Little Mermaid live action movie, it was never Halle Bailey's singing voice. That woman sings beautifully. You're just inventing extra reasons to get mad at this.
People just disagree with this because it's the right thing to say or whatever, but most people would probably agree with these common sense points deep down. When a character is good, race shouldn't matter. Stupid people are funny.
You have just spent half of this video making it very clear that race does in fact matter to you.
Nor should the new spin you put on the character, whether it's a gimmicky change in the age, the gender, the design more broadly, or their persona and attitude in a larger sense. Even things like the Lion King remake piss me off because they clearly capitalized on this and it worked by turning one of the greatest animated films in the 90s into a National Geographic documentary with the occasional reminder that it is in fact a Lion King reboot.
This has literally nothing to do with any of what you just said about making a character different. It should not be this hard to make points at the expense of The Lion King 2019.
Anyway, can't wait to see a Static Shock or Spawn movie, and while they're at it, it wouldn't hurt to race swap one more movie, would it?
I've got nothing to say about that last bit, I just want you to process that. So that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, it takes a lot of effort to make something that makes me get out of my chair and do a backflip within the first minute. I genuinely have no idea what he was cooking with this or why he seems so adamant on being right. I get sticking to what you believe in, even if others say differently, but mate, when you have the entire cartoon community crashing down on you and hundreds of people telling you the things you are saying are giving racist vibes, then maybe you should put down the keyboard and reflect for a second. If you asked me, no, I don't think Askair is some hateful bigot, but if he's not gonna respond to criticism in good faith or learn from this whatsoever or even apologize, then I can safely say this is the most efficient way I've ever seen someone destroy their reputation in this community. It's not like Air is a small channel or anything. He has a decently sized audience, knows a lot of people in the community. I have no idea why he suddenly woke up and thought a video like this was gonna be a banger, because it's not. It's just not. This is a flop and a half. Don't do this stupid shit again, please. Anyway, that's all the time I have today. Apologies for the rough editing on this one. I made this pretty quickly. Play Yakuza or something.